Imagine a mechanical scout forged in the golden sunlight of a different century, now plunging into a realm where the sun is merely the brightest star in a crowded, lightless sky. Picture a sapphire giant at the edge of the dark, its atmosphere a swirling masterpiece of cobalt and frozen methane racing in supersonic silence across the unyielding, frigid void. This cosmic structure carries the echoes of our laughter, the intimate sounds of our diverse greetings, and the complex symmetry of our music across an unbridgeable ocean of time and space. Surprisingly, this traveller has effectively traded the familiar warm tethers of home for the grander, rhythmic pull of the entire galaxy's heavy and silent mass. If we were to look closer, we would find a machine that has outlived its creator's wildest and most daring dreams, moving through a vacuum so perfect it preserves the touch of human hands for 1 billion years. Deep within the absolute silence of the interstellar medium, it remains our furthest sentinel, a golden mirror reflecting the best of our curiosity and our capacity for wonder across the light years. The machine carries a message etched into shimmering electroplated gold, a testimony of a species that dared to look back at its own smallness from the edge of the absolute abyss. We are the architects of this magnificent and historic voyage, and you are the silent witness to its enduring, frozen grace as it glides through the distant stars. In the absolute, lightless stillness of the deep, the Voyager finds its ultimate purpose in the simple, relentless act of moving forward forever through the dark. This quiet room is your own private heliosphere, a protective and warming bubble where the external world cannot reach you or disturb your profound, necessary rest tonight. You are safe. These wonders are yours to inherit as you sleep, and the heavy, comforting weight of the blankets is the only gravity you need to respect as you settle into the stillness. Your awareness is now drifting, matching the steady, weightless pace of the craft as it glides past the final, turbulent boundaries of the sun's reach. Let the tension in your tired mind dissolve into the velvet blackness of the ancient story we're about to tell together in the deep, velvet quiet. The journey into this piece begins with a roar that once split the heavy sky and set the stars in motion toward the infinite expanse. The deep vibration of the Titan-Centaur rocket engines shook the Florida soil in the late summer of 1977, announcing the departure of humanity's most ambitious emissaries. The deep vibration of the Titan-Centaur rocket engines shook the Florida soil in the late summer of 1977, announcing the departure of humanity's most ambitious emissaries. This thunderous roar marked the beginning of a journey perfectly synchronized with the celestial clockwork. A rare arrangement of the outer planets, an alignment occurring only once every 176 years, presented an irresistible opportunity to tour the gas giants in a single, continuous trajectory. If engineers missed this brief temporal window, the outer solar system would remain largely inaccessible for another 2 centuries. The gravitational ballet of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune had essentially created a temporary invisible bridge across the dark void of space. Seizing this fleeting cosmic moment required unprecedented precision, transforming a standard spaceflight into a masterful display of orbital mechanics. Soaring through the dense terrestrial atmosphere, the twin spacecraft surrendered to the monumental forces propelling them outward. They left behind the familiar warmth of our homeworld to chase the alignment of the giants. This historic launch was not merely a departure, but a perfectly timed leap into the deep rhythmic mechanisms of the solar system. Surprisingly, the grand narrative of this twin mission begins with a counterintuitive departure sequence. Voyager 2 actually left the launch pad 16 days before its sibling, lifting off into the Florida sky on August 20th. Despite departing first, this pioneering probe was deliberately placed on a longer, more leisurely trajectory through the interplanetary expanse. This slower path was meticulously calculated to allow an eventual rendezvous with Uranus and Neptune, extending the grand tour far beyond the initial scope. Voyager 1, launching slightly later on a faster and more direct route, would eventually overtake its predecessor in the race to Jupiter and Saturn. The orbital dynamics dictated this unusual scheduling, prioritizing the specific planetary encounters over a simple sequential race. As the second launched probe sped into the dark, the first launched probe settled into its extended cruise. They were identical twins bound by a single mission, yet immediately separated by the uncompromising laws of astrophysics. This staggered departure elegantly orchestrated their divergent destinies among the distant swirling spheres of the outer solar system. Deep within the meticulously crafted aluminum framework, the digital brains guiding these voyagers were marvels of their era, yet remarkably primitive by today's standards. Engineers pack the probes with roughly 68 kilobytes of memory, a fraction of the computing power found in a modern electronic key fob. This staggering limitation meant that every line of code had to be flawlessly optimized to manage complex navigation and scientific observation. The onboard computers operated at clock speed hundreds of thousands of times slower than a contemporary smartphone. Data had to be processed and transmitted with ruthless efficiency, leaving absolutely no room for digital bloat or unnecessary commands. Redundancy was built directly into the hardware architecture, ensuring that if one system failed, a backup could instantly assume control without overwhelming the fragile memory banks. It is a profound testament to human ingenuity that such a monumental expedition was orchestrated with such minimal computational resources. These modest microprocessors commanded the intricate dance of thrusters and cameras across billions of miles of empty space. They continue to whisper their binary secrets in the dark, relying on archaic architecture to navigate the terrifying vastness of the interstellar medium. Navigating the immense distances of the outer solar system required a clever exploitation of celestial mechanics rather than brute force. Gravity assists acting as cosmic slingshots were utilized to continuously propel the ships outward, fundamentally altering the possibilities of interplanetary travel. By precisely diving into the gravitational well of a massive planet like Jupiter, the spacecraft could steal a tiny fraction of the world's orbital energy. This daring maneuver dramatically accelerated the probes, flinging them toward their next target without expending massive, heavy reserves of chemical propellant. If they had relied solely on the fuel carried from Earth, reaching even the orbit of Saturn would have been an impossible dream. Instead, the planets themselves became the engines of the journey, providing the necessary velocity to conquer the widening gaps between orbits. Each encounter was a high-stakes cosmic billiard shot, requiring the spacecraft to thread an incredibly narrow needle through the planet's gravitational field. The sheer elegance of this technique transformed the solar system into a sprawling, interconnected network of orbital highways. Through these invisible gravitational tethers, humanity effectively surfed the momentum of the spheres all the way to the edge of the Sun's domain. Survival in the profound, freezing darkness far beyond the orbit of Mars demands a reliable and enduring source of energy. Deep within the core of each craft, radioisotope thermoelectric generators provided the vital lifeblood necessary to sustain the delicate instruments. These robust devices converted the steady, natural heat released by the radioactive decay of plutonium-238 directly into electricity. Without the glowing warmth of these nuclear batteries, the spacecraft would have quickly succumbed to the absolute cold of deep space, freezing solid within hours. The generators operated silently and continuously, completely immune to the fading light of the distant sun that rendered solar panels useless. They ensured that the cameras could pivot, the antennas could broadcast, and the rudimentary computers could maintain their quiet vigilance. This radioactive heartbeat was engineered to last for decades, steadily pulsing power through the miles of intricate copper wiring. As the years turned into decades, the power output inevitably dwindled, forcing a calculated rationing of electricity among the scientific payloads. Yet, even as they drift through the frigid interstellar void today, this dying ember of nuclear fire continues to keep the explorers marginally alive. The boundless legacy of these twin explorers was born from surprisingly modest bureaucratic beginnings. The ambitious mission was initially only funded for a brief 5-year lifespan, strictly mandated to explore the immediate mysteries of Jupiter and Saturn. Scientists and engineers harboured secret hopes of a grander tour, but the official parameters constrained their overt expectations to these two gas giants alone. Budgetary limitations and the sheer unproven nature of such long-duration spaceflight made extending the official timeline a political impossibility at the time of launch. The hardware was rigorously tested and certified to survive the intense radiation of Jupiter and the icy debris of Saturn, but nothing beyond. Every component was designed to outlast this initial 5-year warranty, a quiet act of rebellion by the engineers who dreamt of Uranus and Neptune. When the initial objectives were flawlessly achieved, the undeniable success provided the necessary leverage to officially extend the scientific mandate. The journey that began as a truncated sprint slowly evolved into an endless sweeping marathon across the outer solar system. This phenomenal return on investment transformed a limited planetary survey into humanity's defining voyage of discovery. Maintaining an optimal internal temperature is a constant, perilous battle when traversing the thermal extremes of the interplanetary void. The iconic 12-foot-wide parabolic dish antenna served a crucial secondary purpose beyond merely transmitting faint radio signals back to Earth. Sunlight reflecting off this massive, stark white structure subtly helped maintain the thermal balance of the entire spacecraft. As the probe journeyed further from the Sun, capturing and utilizing every stray photon became a matter of absolute survival. The antenna acted as a rudimentary thermal shield and reflector, bouncing just enough residual solar radiation back toward the central bus to prevent freezing. This delicate equilibrium was essential for the optical instruments and the fragile tape recorders, which required specific temperature ranges to function accurately. Every physical component of the architecture was forced to multitask in the unforgiving, silent expanse of the outer solar system. The elegant design proved that even the communication hardware could be repurposed to fight off the creeping, lethal chill of deep space. Through this clever manipulation of diminishing sunlight, the explorers maintained their vital warmth while sailing ever deeper into the eternal night. Charting a course across billions of miles requires a fundamental shift in how we perceive targeting and celestial motion. Surprisingly, the incredibly complex trajectory required aiming the rockets exactly where the gas giants would be years in the future, not where they currently resided. The navigators had to essentially shoot a cosmic arrow into an empty patch of darkness, trusting that a massive world would eventually arrive to meet it. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune were hurtling along their immense orbital tracks at thousands of miles per hour while the probes chased them. The mathematics of orbital mechanics dictated a precise interception point, factoring in the gravitational pull of the Sun and the continuous motion of the planets. This predictive targeting demanded absolute perfection, as a miscalculation of mere fractions of a degree at Earth would result in missing a target by millions of miles years later. The void is not static. It is a dynamic, rotating clockwork of staggering proportions and relentless velocity. By predicting the future positions of these titanic spheres, the mission planners successfully solved a 4-dimensional puzzle of unprecedented scale. They aimed at nothingness, and in that nothingness, they eventually found the swirling majesties of the outer solar system. Despite the meticulous planning of the initial launch, the vast journey required continuous, subtle refinements to maintain the fragile trajectory. Tiny hydrazine thrusters precisely nudged the probes along the calculated interplanetary highway, countering the microscopic drift introduced by solar radiation pressure. These delicate bursts of propulsion were critical for keeping the cameras aligned, and the primary antenna pointed squarely at a distant, shrinking Earth. Even the slightest deviation from the planned course would compound over the years, severely jeopardizing the crucial gravity assists and scientific observations. The navigation team continuously monitored the faint radio telemetry, calculating the exact millisecond these thrusters needed to fire to correct the path. Firing these small jets required waking the primitive onboard computer from its dormant state to execute the complex rotational commands. It was a continuous slow-motion ballet of celestial navigation, requiring an unwavering vigilance that spanned entire decades of quiet cruising. The absolute precision of these maneuvers ensured that the explorers arrived at their specific rendezvous points right on schedule. Through these tiny, invisible puffs of gas, humanity asserted its delicate control over these silent sentinels soaring through the abyss. As the intense violence of the launch subsided, a profound and enduring serenity enveloped the speeding mechanical travelers. A quiet, steady hum resonated through the aluminum framework, the only sound accompanying the greatest voyage in human history. This subtle vibration was the mechanical heartbeat of the gyroscopes and the spinning tape recorders, a testament to the persistent life of the machines. Outside the thin metal shielding, the absolute vacuum of space offered no resistance and carried no acoustic echoes of their passage. They slipped silently past the orbit of Mars, crossing the invisible threshold into the truly alien territories of the outer planets. The frantic activity of the terrestrial engineers was replaced by the patient, eternal watchfulness of the automated systems scanning the dark horizon. This gentle humming marked the transition from a daring experiment to an enduring, permanent fixture of the cosmic landscape. The probes were no longer merely objects built on Earth. They had become active participants in the grand choreography of the solar system. Bound for the spaces between the stars, they carried the quiet pulse of human curiosity into the infinite stretching night. Carrying that quiet pulse of human curiosity into the stretching night, the silent vanguard eventually encountered a realm that defied all terrestrial logic. Approaching the massive sphere in our planetary neighbourhood, shattered prior assumptions of a tranquil gaseous giant. Instead of a serene globe, the arriving optics unveiled a violently dynamic world, a chaotic canvas of churning ammonia and hydrogen. Swirling, turbulent bands of orange and cream painted a vast, endless atmosphere that seethed with continuous massive tempests. The sheer scale of the atmospheric turbulence rendered our home planet's most devastating storms insignificant by comparison. Complex jet streams tore across the upper cloud decks in opposing directions, creating immense friction and spectacular swirling eddies at their boundaries. Previously blurry telescopic views from the ground had offered merely a hint of this breathtaking complexity. Now, suspended directly above the roaring cloud tops, the robotic observer captured the intricate feather-like wisps of upwelling chemical storms. The majesty of this swirling behemoth redefined our understanding of planetary atmospheres, proving that beauty and unimaginable violence could coexist perfectly. Plunging visual sensors deeper into the southern hemisphere, an ancient and colossal structure dominated the atmospheric tapestry. The legendary Crimson Eye, a massive anticyclonic hurricane, raged with a ferocity that had sustained itself long before human eyes ever looked through a glass lens. This solitary storm system was so profoundly gargantuan that our entire blue, watery home could be dropped into its centre with room to spare. The winds screaming around the outer edge of this monstrous vortex reached velocities that would strip the bark from any earthly tree in seconds. Deep within its core, upwelling phosphorus and complex sulfur compounds reacted with ultraviolet starlight, baking the clouds into a distinct bruised scarlet hue. It acted as an atmospheric engine, feeding off smaller storms, ruthlessly consuming them to fuel its own perpetual rotating fury. Peering into the eye of this beast, scientists recognized a weather system entirely disconnected from the solid ground friction that kills terrestrial hurricanes. Here, in a bottomless ocean of gas, the storm fed directly from the internal, primordial heat leaking from the planet's crushing metallic core. It stood as a mesmerizing, terrifying testament to the sheer, unbridled power of nature operating on a cosmic scale. Gliding into the massive shadow cast by the gas giant, the endless night revealed an entirely different, startling phenomenon. The thick, rolling clouds were suddenly illuminated from within by rapid, brilliant flashes of atmospheric electricity. lightning, previously thought to be an exclusively terrestrial display, violently tore through the deep ammonia storm cells with unimaginable power. These sudden bursts of light were vastly more energetic than any thunderstorm experienced on our gentle home world. Each blinding flash briefly silhouetted the towering mountainous cloud formations, creating a spectral, flickering landscape in the absolute dark. The sheer energy released in a solitary stroke could power entire human civilizations, crackling across immense stretches of dense, churning atmosphere. Observing this explosive light show fundamentally altered planetary meteorology, proving that the basic mechanisms of storm generation were universal. Water and ammonia ice particles, rubbing furiously against each other in the violent updrafts, generated colossal static charges in the freezing upper altitudes. As you sink deeper into the cushions beneath your resting body, allow the tension in your shoulders to release, feeling the heavy gravity anchoring you safely away from such turbulent skies. Diverting its gaze from the striped clouds, the mechanical explorer focused on a small, peculiar moon orbiting perilously close to the giant. Initial expectations of a dead, cratered rock were instantly shattered by the most shocking revelation of the entire planetary encounter. This tortured satellite, caught in a merciless gravitational tug-of-war, was actively erupting, making it the most volcanically active body ever witnessed. The surface was a bizarre, rapidly changing mosaic of vivid yellows, reds, and blacks, completely devoid of the ancient impact craters common to dead worlds. Liquid rock continuously paved over any scars, actively remaking the landscape through a relentless barrage of catastrophic geological events. This tiny sphere was essentially turning itself inside out, driven by the intense tidal heating generated as it was squeezed and stretched by massive orbital forces. Discovering active geology far beyond the warming rays of the sun fundamentally rewrote the textbooks on planetary formation and internal energy. The scientific community was completely caught off guard, forced to instantly accept that ice and cold were not the absolute rulers of the outer dark. It was a beautiful, violent anomaly, a glowing ember of relentless creation trapped in a freezing, endless night. Looking precisely at the horizon of this tortured moon against the blackness of space, the cameras captured an ethereal, umbrella-shaped ghost. Massive plumes of sulfur dioxide gas and fine silicate dust were being violently expelled into the airless void. These towering fountains of debris reached towering altitudes utterly impossible on our world, completely unhindered by a thick atmosphere or crushing gravity. The material blasted upward at supersonic speeds, freezing instantly in the bitter chill before gently raining back down like a toxic, colourful snow. This continuous fallout painted the surrounding terrain in vast, concentric rings of brilliant alien hues, constantly refreshing the moon's vivid palette. The energy required to launch rock and gas to such extreme heights spoke to the terrifying pressures building beneath the fractured, glowing crust. Navigating through the invisible, extended cloud of this fallout proved that the moon was actively feeding a vast, invisible torus of charged particles. The ejected material did not just fall back, much of it escaped entirely, stripping away into a glowing ring that traced the satellite's orbital path. This hyperactive rock was single-handedly altering the magnetic and chemical environment of the entire planetary system. Turning toward a neighbouring satellite, a starkly different serene vista replaced the volcanic chaos. A pristine, incredibly smooth crust of solid ice reflected the distant starlight, crisscrossed by a complex web of dark, mysterious fractures. The absolute absence of towering mountains or deep impact basins heavily hinted at a pliable, shifting surface rather than solid rock. This fractured shell resembled the shifting tectonic ice packs found in our own polar oceans, suggesting a profound hidden secret. The intricate intersecting ridges strongly indicated that a vast global ocean of liquid, salty water lay concealed just beneath the frozen exterior. Tidal forces similar to those tearing apart its volcanic neighbour were likely generating just enough internal warmth to keep this submerged abyss from freezing solid. As you take a slow, deep breath in, notice the steady rhythmic expansion of your chest, mirroring the slow, tidal breathing of this distant, frozen world. The realization that an alien ocean, containing more liquid water than all terrestrial seas combined, existed in the outer dark sparked an enduring scientific obsession. Beneath that fractured, icy silence, in a lightless abyss warmed by tidal friction, the fundamental ingredients for biological life might be patiently waiting. The unseen architecture surrounding this planetary kingdom proved far more perilous than the swirling tempests themselves. A colossal magnetic field, the largest continuous structure in our neighbourhood of stars, enveloped the giant, stretching vast gulfs into the void. This invisible behemoth trapped incredibly energetic charged particles, creating a localized radiation environment of terrifying intensity. Plunging through this lethal zone threatened to permanently fry the delicate, archaic onboard instruments and scramble the carefully sequenced computer memories. The metallic hull of the mechanical traveller was subjected to a relentless bombardment of accelerated electrons and ions, essentially flying through the heart of a cosmic particle accelerator. Software engineers had meticulously designed the hardware to withstand this exact gauntlet, but the sheer volume of radiation exceeded even their most cautious models. This invisible shield not only endangered the crossing, but also generated brilliant permanent auroras at the magnetic poles of the gas giant. These glowing halos of ultraviolet light dwarfed any northern lights seen from our terrestrial snows, powered by the constant influx of volcanic dust and solar wind. Surviving this invisible firestorm was a paramount engineering triumph, allowing the fragile sensors to continue their grand survey unblinded. Gazing back toward the blinding glare of the sun, the cameras were instructed to search for something previously considered exclusive to a different world. Suspended in the equatorial plane, a remarkably faint dusty halo was successfully spotted encircling the massive striped sphere. This ephemeral discovery proved unequivocally that the majestic adorned neighbour was not the sole possessor of a planetary ring system. Unlike the brilliant icy shards of its famous cousin, this ghostly band was composed entirely of microscopic dark rock particles. These tiny fragments were incredibly inefficient at reflecting light, making them practically invisible from a terrestrial vantage point until the probe slid into the planetary shadow. The material was constantly being replenished by high-velocity micrometeorite impacts, striking the small inner moons nestled close to the churning cloud decks. This fragile architecture demonstrated that rings are a fundamental common feature of immense gravitational wells, rather than a unique, isolated anomaly. The sheer dust slowly spiraled downward, doomed to eventually burn up in the upper atmosphere, locked in a continuous cycle of destruction and renewal. Uncovering this gossamer veil added an unexpected layer of subtle elegance to a world previously defined solely by its overwhelming massive brute force. Capturing these ghostly rings and the dark side auroras required pushing the optical instruments far beyond their original design parameters. Travelling at breakneck speeds across the orbital paths, the cameras needed extremely long exposure times to gather the scarce precious photons. This delicate process necessitated incredible camera stability, demanding that the speeding spacecraft remain absolutely motionless while hurtling through the dark. To prevent blurring, the internal gyroscopes and microscopic thrusters executed a flawless compensatory dance to negate the inherent motion of the sweeping trajectory. Slowly panning the camera platform to perfectly track the target, while screaming past at dizzying velocities, was akin to threading a microscopic needle on a speeding train. The precision required to hold that gaze steady in the freezing vacuum remains one of the most astonishing mechanical feats of the entire endeavour. Without this unprecedented control, the faint rings and the explosive lightning would have remained invisible, lost in a smear of digital noise. The engineers had essentially transformed a rapidly moving, vibrating metal chassis into the most stable, steady astronomical observatory ever constructed. Let the quiet stillness of the room around you deepen, feeling the heavy, comforting immobility of your own resting state, a stark contrast to that dizzying orbital velocity. Every sweeping vista, every thermal reading, and every magnetic signature had to be painstakingly translated into a simple sequence of binary pulses. This priceless digitized treasure trickled back to our awaiting antennas at agonizingly slow rates across unfathomable distances. The immense void stretched the fragile radio waves to their absolute breaking point, arriving as a whisper so faint it barely registered above the natural background noise of the cosmos. Huge, dish-shaped receivers scattered across our globe had to strain continuously, perfectly synchronized with the rotation of the Earth, just to catch these fading echoes. The transmission rate was so sluggish that it required long hours to successfully download a solitary monochrome image of a swirling storm or a fractured ice field. Scientists sat in hushed, agonizing anticipation, watching the unprecedented images build upon their monitors line by agonizing line. This slow, digital drip fed an insatiable hunger for discovery, proving that distance was no longer an absolute barrier to understanding. The archaic communication system, relying on less power than a small refrigerator bulb, successfully bridged a gap of space previously thought insurmountable. That fragile thread of telemetry forever bound our warm, blue world to the swirling, violent majesty of the outer dark. Gliding further into that outer dark, the fragile thread of telemetry pulsed with the blinding glint of sunlight scattering off a celestial crown. The pale yellow giant revealed a magnificent sweeping halo that completely dwarfed any orbital structure previously encountered in the deep void. Instead of a solid, continuous planetary disk, this breathtaking architecture was composed of myriad independent fragments trapped in a perpetual swirling orbital dance. Vast swarms of suspended ice crystals reflecting the distant star created a dazzling optical illusion of a unified solid plane. Hovering closer, the optical sensors resolved this sheer expanse into an endless ocean of frozen debris ranging from microscopic frost to drifting, jagged mountains. Each individual icy piece maintained its own precise orbit, a solitary traveller contributing to the grand, luminous chorus of the massive ringed system. This shattered debris field whispered of ancient cataclysms, perhaps the pulverized remains of a destroyed moon ripped apart by overwhelming tidal forces. The sheer scale of this icy tapestry defied all terrestrial comprehension, stretching across immense expanses of completely empty vacuum. It stood as a radiant, crystalline masterpiece, standing in stark, beautiful contrast to the violent, swirling atmospheric cloud decks raging endlessly below. Strangely, this perfect orbital symmetry was marred by phantom-like blemishes that challenged our fundamental understanding of celestial mechanics. Ghostly, wedge-shaped spokes of mysterious dark material were observed, silently rotating just above the blinding white plane of the main rings. These eerie shadows swept across the icy expanse in perfect unison, seemingly ignoring the foundational laws of planetary orbital velocity. According to classical physics, objects closer to the planetary core should orbit significantly faster than those further out, tearing any radial structure apart. Yet, these massive dark fingers maintained their rigid shape as they rotated, moving collectively with the planet's internal magnetic field rather than gravity. This shocking revelation indicated that electromagnetic forces were actively sculpting the rings, levitating fine dust particles high above the larger tumbling boulders. The ephemeral shadows materialized and faded within brief orbital periods, dynamically reacting to the angle of the distant sunlight striking the dusty levitation. Witnessing these ghostly apparitions proved that the rings were not just a static graveyard of ice, but an electrically charged, highly dynamic environment. Their sudden presence fundamentally altered the scientific models, introducing complex electromagnetism into the previously gravity-dominated realm of orbital fluid dynamics. Peering into the dark, narrow gaps separating the brilliant bands, another mechanism of exquisite cosmic control was soon discovered. Tiny, irregularly shaped moons were observed patrolling the edges of the rings, acting as tireless gravitational sentinels maintaining absolute order. These shepherding bodies used their subtle gravitational tugs to actively corral the straying ice particles back into their designated lanes. As they cruised along the absolute fringes of the chaotic debris, their presence swept the gaps perfectly clean, creating astonishingly sharp borders. Any icy fragment drifting too far from the main pack was either forcefully ejected or gently nudged back into the collective herd. This delicate, continuous interaction sculpted the majestic halos with a precision that mimicked the carefully tended boundaries of a formal terrestrial garden. As you lie completely still, notice the gentle, protective boundary of the space immediately surrounding your resting form, keeping the outside world at bay. In much the same way, these tiny celestial custodians tirelessly guard the integrity of the sweeping rings against the entropic pull of the void. Without their constant, invisible nudges, the magnificent architecture would slowly dissipate, bleeding out into the immense dark expanse. Diverting the optical sensors away from the rings, a massive, mysterious satellite emerged as a primary target of unparalleled intrigue. Unlike the fractured, icy shells of its neighbouring siblings, this colossal moon was completely shrouded in a thick, opaque photochemical haze. An impenetrable blanket of deep orange smog hid its surface entirely, thwarting the piercing gaze of the approaching mechanical explorer. This dense atmospheric veil was completely unique among the known planetary satellites, rivaling the thick clouds covering our own terrestrial home. The murky envelope absorbed and scattered the weak sunlight, preventing any visual confirmation of the geological landscape lurking below. Scientists stared at a featureless tangerine sphere, their anticipation agonizingly blocked by the dense alien smog enveloping the massive world. To navigate through the dark, the instruments had to rely on indirect measurements to pierce the veil and infer the hidden reality. This deliberate obfuscation only heightened the intense fascination, transforming the orange globe into the ultimate prize of the planetary flyby. The impenetrable smog promised profound secrets, hiding an environment completely protected from the harsh, sterilizing vacuum of deep space. Analyzing the chemical signatures leaking from the upper atmosphere of this veiled giant revealed a stunningly familiar, yet utterly alien composition. Abundant molecules of methane and complex hydrocarbons were detected floating within the nitrogen-rich smog, creating an organic soup suspended in the deep freeze. This specific chemical cocktail made the shrouded sphere look eerily like a perfectly preserved, frozen snapshot of our own primordial world. Eons ago, before life fundamentally altered our atmosphere, the early terrestrial skies were likely choked with a very similar orange organic haze. Now, suspended at the absolute edge of the solar system, a chillingly precise analogue of our ancient past drifted silently in the freezing dark. The intense cold effectively halted the chemical evolution, trapping the vital building blocks of life in a state of suspended cryogenic animation. Deep beneath the smog, an unseen landscape was likely bathed in a continuous gentle rain of liquid ethane and liquid methane. Oceans and rivers of liquid natural gas might be carving valleys into a crust made of solid, rock-hard water ice. This bizarre reflection of our own hydrological cycle offered a terrifyingly beautiful glimpse into a parallel evolution, starved entirely of warmth. Turning the gaze back to the main attraction, a higher resolution scan shattered the illusion of broad, uniform bands of ice. Peering closer at the sweeping structure revealed a multitude of delicate concentric ringlets tightly packed within the larger luminous halos. The architecture was incredibly intricate, resembling the fine, tightly wound grooves physically etched into the surface of an archaic phonograph record. This shocking complexity meant the system was not composed of just a few major zones, but literally multitudes of individual distinct orbital paths. Some of the ringlets were perfectly circular, while others possessed strange, undulating ripples and sharp kinks driven by hidden gravitational resonances. The sheer density of these fine structures created a mesmerizing, hypnotic pattern that stretched endlessly across the orbital plane. As your eyes remain closed, let the steady rhythm of your breathing align with the endless circular flow of these countless icy tracks. The microscopic precision of these grooves demonstrated that the colossal gravitational forces were operating on a terrifyingly granular level. It was a cosmic symphony physically written in pulverized ice, waiting in absolute silence for an audience capable of perceiving its sweeping scale. Navigating this dazzling, chaotic debris field required a maneuver of extreme precision to ensure the survival of the fragile emissary. Rather than risking a direct passage through the densest regions, the trajectory was designed to dip cautiously beneath the equatorial ring plane. This daring dive was absolutely critical to avoid catastrophic collisions with the countless stray fragments of ice hurtling through the local space. Even a microscopic grain of frozen dust, impacting at the blistering velocity of the planetary flyby, could pierce vital fluid lines or shatter optical lenses. The automated systems guided the chassis through a perfectly calculated gap, threading the needle between the majestic halos and the turbulent atmosphere below. For a brief, terrifying interval, the mechanical traveller was completely enveloped by the towering, icy cliffs of the towering ring system overhead. Gliding safely beneath the danger zone provided an unprecedented, spectacular view of the underside of the sunlit canopy. The dark, shadowed face of the rings glowed with scattered light, casting long, eerie silhouettes across the pale, yellow cloud decks of the host world. This calculated risk ensured the continuation of the grand tour, escaping the beautiful hazard unscathed to continue its profound reconnaissance. Beneath that sweeping canopy of ice, the seemingly placid, pale yellow atmosphere hid a violently energetic weather system. Atmospheric measurements recorded intense, sustained equatorial winds whipping across the featureless cloud decks at truly tremendous, unrelenting speeds. These gales blew eastward with a ferocity that significantly outpaced the most violent jet streams measured on the previously visited gas giant. Lacking the dramatic, swirling spots and chaotic, contrasting bands of its massive neighbour, the visual serenity of this world was a complete illusion. The pale, uniform haze effectively masked the brutal atmospheric engine operating just beneath the uppermost layers of ammonia frost. Driven by the planet's rapid rotation and internal heat, the superwinds smoothed out the turbulent weather, creating a deceptively calm facade. The sheer momentum of this atmospheric flow demonstrated that tremendous energy was not always accompanied by chaotic, visually stunning storms. Here, the raw power was channeled into a relentless singular current that endlessly encircled the massive globe in absolute howling darkness. This discovery proved that each massive world harboured a unique, hidden mechanism for dissipating its tremendous primordial heat into the surrounding void. Coasting outward toward the fringes of the system, a small, blindingly bright satellite captured the attention of the outbound cameras. This tiny sphere displayed an unusually reflective terrain, a surface so pristine and white it bounced almost all striking sunlight back into the void. The absolute lack of ancient cratering in vast regions heavily hinted at a profound, ongoing process of internal geological resurfacing. Something hidden deep within the frozen core was actively erasing the scars of cosmic impacts, continually paving the surface with fresh, clean snow. The brilliant plains were carved by long, deep fissures and tectonic grooves, suggesting a brittle crust floating on a dynamic, moving interior. Like its volcanic counterpart in the inner system, this tiny ice world was being actively kneaded and heated by relentless orbital friction. Allow the sensation of your relaxed limbs to deepen, feeling the heavy stillness of your bones mirroring the deep frozen shell of that radiant moon. The stark brightness of its plains stood as a beacon in the outer dark, whispering promises of hidden warmth and subterranean liquid. This tiny glowing pearl would later become among the most compelling targets in the entire search for habitable environments beyond the sun. Completing this magnificent survey marked a critical divergence in the grand choreography of the twin mechanical emissaries. Passing close to the pale yellow giant provided the precise, necessary gravitational kick to successfully alter the trajectory of the surviving traveller. This massive orbital slingshot effectively hurled the probe completely out of the ecliptic plane, aiming it directly toward the unexplored ice giants lurking deeper in the abyss, while its sibling was forever directed upward and away from the planetary disk. This solitary explorer embarked on a lonely extended marathon. The alignment of the spheres had been perfectly exploited, trading the momentum of a massive world for the crucial velocity needed to cross the immense widening gaps. It was a masterful stroke of celestial billiards, executed flawlessly in the absolute freezing silence of the outer system. Leaving the sweeping icy halos behind, the chassis settled into a long quiet cruise through an entirely new, darker realm of the solar neighbourhood. The radiant crown of the ringed world slowly faded into a tiny brilliant speck, a fading memory captured in archaic computer banks. Ahead lay the absolute uncharted wilderness, where the sunlight was painfully dim and the true, freezing depths of the outer dark finally began. In that absolute uncharted wilderness, where the true, freezing depths of the outer dark finally began, a solitary sentinel pressed into the deepening chill of the seventh world. Arriving in the bitter, silent winter of early 1986, the mechanical explorer encountered a realm so distant that the very concept of home had become a mathematical abstraction. This journey was a singular, historic achievement, as no other human craft has since ventured into the pale aquamarine glow of this specific celestial neighbour. The probe was the first and only emissary to witness the featureless cloud decks of Uranus up close, capturing data that would remain our primary source of knowledge for decades. It navigated the desolate expanse with a quiet dignity, its archaic sensors straining to resolve the details of a planet shrouded in methane ice and ancient silence. This arrival marked the furthest reach of the Grand Tour's initial phase, cementing the probe's status as a pioneer in the most remote reaches of the Sun's influence. As it drifted past the aquamarine sphere, the spacecraft recorded the profound isolation of a world that orbits the Sun in nearly total obscurity. This solitary trek was not merely a scientific mission, but a lonely testament to the reach of human inquiry into the freezing void. Surprisingly, the fundamental geometry of this world defies the upright elegance of its planetary siblings. The aquamarine giant rolls through its orbit on its side like a discarded barrel, its rotational axis tilted nearly 98 degrees relative to the Sun. This radical orientation fundamentally alters the nature of the seasons, plunging each pole into 42 years of continuous freezing darkness, followed by decades of unblinking light. This peculiar tilt suggests a violent past, perhaps involving a catastrophic collision with an Earth-sized object that knocked the planet off its original axis during the chaotic formation of the solar system. The atmospheric dynamics are entirely unique because the Sun beats directly down on the poles rather than the equator, creating weather patterns that follow a completely different set of rules. Despite this extreme orientation, the planet remains a featureless pale sphere of serene aquamarine, masking the internal turmoil created by its horizontal rotation. It moves through the dark void with a strange rolling motion, a celestial anomaly that continues to challenge our models of how giant planets develop and maintain their stability over eons. Deep within the frozen interior, a magnetic heart beats with a rhythm that is profoundly disjointed from the planet's physical rotation. Instruments detected a magnetic field that is wildly off-center, shifted nearly a third of the way toward the surface rather than originating from the core. This invisible, lopsided architecture creates a chaotic magnetosphere that wobbles and twists as the planet spins through the dark. The tilt of the magnetic field is nearly 60 degrees away from the rotational axis, a bizarre configuration that is not seen in the larger gas giants close to the Sun. This misalignment suggests that the magnetic field is generated not by a central metallic core, but by a churning, electrically conductive ocean of water and ammonia deeper in the mantle. As the probe passed through this invisible maze, it recorded the intense interactions between the lopsided field and the solar wind, revealing a magnetosphere that is constantly reshaping itself. This bizarre discovery forced scientists to reconsider the internal structure of ice giants, proving that the deep mechanisms of planetary protection are far more varied than previously imagined. As your body surrenders to the steady, comforting weight of the surface beneath you, contemplate the absolute stillness of a world where molecular motion nearly ceases. Temperatures in the upper reaches of this featureless atmosphere plunge to unimaginable depths, making it the coldest planetary environment ever recorded in our solar neighbourhood. This freezing silence is not merely a lack of heat, but a profound crystalline stasis that dominates the high-altitude methane clouds. The stillness is so complete that the probe's sensors had to work with extreme sensitivity to detect the subtle, frozen currents moving through the pale blue haze. In this realm of absolute cold, the very air itself begins to freeze out into delicate crystals of methane ice. It is a place of ultimate tranquility, where the frantic energy of the inner solar system is finally and completely extinguished. If we were to look closer at the icy, desolate expanse surrounding the pale sphere, a hidden family of satellites would slowly emerge from the gloom. The passing explorer successfully unmasked 10 previously unknown moons, tiny dark worlds that had spent eons drifting in total anonymity. These small, cratered bodies act as silent companions to the aquamarine giant, their orbits woven into the complex gravitational tapestry of the outer system. Most of these new discoveries are small, irregularly shaped fragments of rock and ice, coated in a dark, carbon-rich material that makes them nearly invisible to terrestrial telescopes. They serve as guardians of the narrow ring system, their subtle gravity helping to maintain the delicate structure of the debris circling the planet. This sudden expansion of the known Uranian system revealed a crowded and dynamic environment where scientists had previously expected only empty space. Each of these tiny moons carries the scars of ancient collisions, serving as frozen time capsules from the earliest days of the solar system's construction. Their discovery transformed the tilted planet from a lonely outpost into the centre of a bustling, complex lunar family. This fractured surface of the moon, Miranda reveals a geological history so chaotic it suggests a world repeatedly shattered and reassembled. Enormous ice canyons and jagged scarps dominate the landscape, with cliffs that plunge vertically for miles into the freezing dark. Some of these tectonic gashes are far deeper and more violent than the Grand Canyon on Earth, presenting a patchwork of mismatched terrain that defies traditional theories. The moon features strange racetrack-like structures called coronae, where the icy crust has been warped and folded by intense internal pressures. It appears as though the moon's interior was once partially melted, causing different layers of rock and ice to churn and rise to the surface in a spectacular display of geological upheaval. The sheer variety of terrain on such a small moon was one of the most unexpected findings of the entire mission, proving that even tiny frozen worlds can harbour immense complexity. Standing on the edge of one of Miranda's towering cliffs, one would look across a landscape of absolute frozen violence, a silent monument to the power of tidal forces and ancient impacts. Contrary to the brilliant icy splendour of the previous planetary encounter, the rings surrounding this tilted world are as dark as coal. These exceptionally narrow bands of debris are composed of material that absorbs almost all striking sunlight, rendering them nearly invisible against the blackness of the void. They exist as thin, concentrated threads of ancient rock and dust, lacking the expansive, luminous halos that define the gas giants. The rings are likely composed of organic compounds that have been charred by billions of years of exposure to cosmic radiation, turning them into a deep matte black. They are kept in their precise narrow orbits by a series of small shepherding moons that prevent the dark dust from drifting away into the surrounding emptiness. This discovery proved that ring systems come in a vast array of forms, from the majestic and bright to the subtle and shadowy. These dark halos represent a different kind of orbital beauty, a minimalist architecture of dust and shadow that whispers of the quiet, relentless processes shaping the outer solar system. They encircle the aquamarine planet like delicate charcoal sketches against the velvet backdrop of the deep. At this extreme distance of nearly 2 billion miles, the once mighty sun has shrunk into a remarkably bright, yet heatless star hanging in the velvet black. Sunlight is so faint here that it barely illuminates the featureless cloud decks, casting shadows that are long, sharp, and profoundly cold. The warmth of the inner system is a distant, impossible dream, replaced by a dim, clinical light that reveals the aquamarine globe in a pale, haunting glow. Photography at this distance required the spacecraft to perform a delicate anti-smear maneuver, rotating its entire body to compensate for its high velocity and the long exposure times needed in the dim light. The resulting images revealed a world that exists in a state of perpetual twilight, where the distinction between day and night is a subtle shift in the intensity of a freezing distant spark. Wait for the pulse of a signal to traverse the unbridgeable gap, a message that takes nearly 3 hours to travel one way at the speed of light. Every command sent from the listening antennas of the deep space network on Earth must endure this long, silent transit through the emptiness. By the time a confirmation reaches the engineers, the spacecraft has already moved tens of thousands of miles further into the uncharted wilderness. This immense lag creates a profound sense of isolation for the mission controllers, who must plan every move with a 3-hour delay in mind. If an emergency occurs, the spacecraft must rely on its own archaic, pre-programmed logic to survive, as help from Earth is effectively 6 hours away. The communication becomes a slow, rhythmic dialogue between two different worlds, a binary whisper that bridges the billions of miles of cold vacuum. As you feel the rhythm of your own pulse, consider the vastness of a space where even light itself seems to struggle against the distance. This delayed conversation is the only link between the mortal creators and their mechanical emissary, a fragile tether of information that persists despite the overwhelming scale of the void. It is a testament to the endurance of the radio waves as they ripple through the dark toward a tiny, waiting home. Pushing outward into the ultimate frontier, the lonely probe adjusted its course one final time with a series of precise thruster firings. This delicate orbital maneuver was essential to align the trajectory for a final planetary rendezvous with the great blue world lurking even further in the deep. With the tilted solitude of the seventh planet fading behind it, the traveller committed itself to the final leg of its legendary grand tour. The fuel reserves were carefully managed to ensure this final course correction was executed with absolute perfection, as there would be no more chances for significant adjustments. The trajectory was now a locked, unchangeable path leading toward the final encounter of the primary mission. Behind it, the aquamarine sphere of Uranus began to shrink, returning to the status of a pale, silent dot in the rearview of the sensors. As that pale, silent dot dissolved into the rearview of the sensors, a new, vibrant spectre began to materialize in the forward gaze, glowing with a saturation that seemed impossible so far from the solar fire. The atmosphere of this final eighth world is saturated with a striking deep azure hue, a coloration far more intense and brooding than the pale aquamarine of its horizontal neighbour. High-altitude methane gas acts as a selective and hungry filter, absorbing the long wavelength red light from the dimming sun and reflecting only the coldest, most piercing blues back into the void. If we were to look closer at this sapphire brilliance, we would find a world where the chemistry of light and gas has created a masterpiece of monochromatic beauty. The sunlight reaching this distance is nearly 1,000 times fainter than it is on our homeworld, yet the planet appears to glow with its own internal royal light. This brooding azure mask serves as the final majestic sentinel of the sun's planetary domain. Wispy white clouds of frozen methane race furiously across this cobalt expanse, appearing as ethereal streaks in a perpetual high-altitude gale. These brilliant white feathers provide the only visual contrast to the deep blue depths, allowing the tracking sensors to map the incredible speed of the atmospheric currents. They are ghosts of ice haunting a world defined by the absolute dominance of a single cold colour. Deep within this cobalt expanse, a massive anticyclonic tempest was observed churning with fierce, rhythmic intensity, a dark blemish on an otherwise perfect blue sphere. This great dark spot appeared as a bruised, elliptical hollow in the cloud decks, its scale rivaling the entire diameter of our own world. Much like the legendary storm witnessed on the King of Planets, this vortex rotated in a counterclockwise direction, pulling colder gases from the interior up into the freezing heights. Surprisingly, later observations would reveal that this specific storm was not a permanent feature of the Neptunian landscape. While the storms of the inner gas giants seemed to endure for centuries, this azure vortex proved to be a dynamic and wandering phenomenon that eventually vanished into the mist. It suggests a planetary environment that is more volatile and change-prone than the stoic appearance of the outer giants might lead us to believe. These gales are driven by a mysterious internal heat source that allows the atmosphere to churn with such unbridled energy, despite the freezing distance from the sun. On our world, weather is powered by the warmth of the solar disk, but here, the engine resides in the crushing hot heart of the planet itself. The lack of land masses or solid friction allows these winds to accelerate indefinitely, creating a global circuit of supersonic motion. The sheer momentum of these atmospheric currents represents the ultimate extreme of planetary meteorology. In this lightless, freezing realm, the air does not merely blow, it erupts in a continuous planetary-scale jet stream. It is a world where the weather has reached its most violent and uncompromising expression. As you feel the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your breath, imagine the absolute cessation of molecular motion on the largest moon of this system. Triton emerged as one of the coldest objects ever directly measured by a human spacecraft. A freezing desert where the temperature hovers only a few degrees above absolute zero. The environment is so extreme that the very nitrogen air has collapsed and frozen onto the ground, creating a landscape of glittering pinkish frost. Triton is a geological rebel, orbiting its host planet in a retrograde direction that defies the rotational flow of the other moons. This suggests it was once a wandering inhabitant of the icy Kuiper belt, captured eons ago by the planet's immense gravitational embrace. Now, it drifts in a slow, inward spiral, doomed to eventually be torn apart by the very gravity that holds it. The temperatures here are so profound that they challenge our understanding of planetary chemistry and survival. Everything on the surface is locked in a crystalline stasis, preserved in a deep freeze that has remained undisturbed for billions of years. It is the ultimate outpost of the cold, a silent world resting at the edge of the abyss. This frozen silence is punctuated by sudden, explosive displays of geothermal defiance. Nitrogen geysers erupt from Triton's fractured surface, blasting dark, sooty material several miles into the thin, non-existent atmosphere. The freezing wind catches these plumes, stretching them into long, dark streaks that pattern the pinkish ice, a stark visual record of a moon that is still geologically alive. Nitrogen gas, warmed by a faint internal heat source, builds up pressure beneath the surface ice until it finally shatters the crust in a violent high-pressure jet. These fountains are the only motion in an otherwise static world, casting shadows that stretch across the cantaloupe-textured plains. They prove that even in the coldest corners of the universe, the internal fires of a world can still find a way to breathe. The freezing material eventually rains back down to the surface, creating dark deposits that act as weather vanes for the moon's faint seasonal winds. These eruptions represent a unique form of cryovolcanism, where ice and gas take the place of molten rock. It is a spectacular, ghostly display of energy occurring in total lightless silence. Executing its final planetary maneuver, the mechanical explorer performed a daring close proximity swoop just 3,000 miles above the planet's northern pole. This proximity was the closest the probe had ever come to a gas giant, a high-stakes gamble intended to maximize the scientific return of the final encounter. The sheer proximity allowed for unprecedented detail of the polar cloud structures, even as the planet's immense gravity reached out to claim the spacecraft's momentum. This maneuver was a masterpiece of orbital navigation, requiring the probe to dive deep into the gravity well to achieve the necessary speed for its departure. As it skimmed over the azure clouds, the sensors captured the chaotic, swirling textures of the polar weather in high resolution. The risk was immense, but the resulting data provided our first and only look at the hidden geography of the Neptunian North. The sheer speed of the flyby meant that the entire encounter lasted only a few hours, a fleeting moment of contact after 12 years of travel. During this brief window, the spacecraft was effectively a part of the planetary system, moving in perfect harmony with the azure giant. It was a final, intimate greeting before the long, permanent goodbye. If we were to look closer at the equatorial plane, we would find a ring system that defies the uniform elegance of previous worlds. Instead of continuous halos, the sensors confirm the existence of faint, clumped ring arcs, where debris is bunched together by hidden gravitational resonances. These arcs appear like broken, luminous eyelashes in the dark, proof that the distribution of matter in these icy rings is subject to complex and uneven forces. Instead of a smooth disk, the ring system is composed of several narrow bands, with names reflecting the early pioneers of planetary discovery. The material in these arcs is kept from spreading out by the subtle, gravitational tugs of small nearby moons acting as orbital shepherds. It is a fragmented and delicate architecture, a minimalist version of the grand ring seen earlier in the journey. As you sink deeper into the stillness of your surroundings, notice the absolute lack of resistance against your form, mirroring the weightless drift of these fragmented arcs. They encircle the blue planet like a collection of fragile icy memories, slowly rotating in the dark. Their presence adds a final layer of subtle complexity to the final planet of the Grand Tour. For a generation of scientists, this moment was the culmination of a lifetime of work and anticipation. The images of Neptune were the last new views of a major planet that humanity would receive for decades. The mission had succeeded beyond all original expectations, turning grainy dots of light into complex, vibrant worlds. The final signals were received with a mixture of triumph and quiet melancholy at the mission control centers on Earth. The Grand Tour was over, and the era of planetary discovery for these specific emissaries had come to its natural end. The probes had finished their primary work, leaving behind a legacy of knowledge that would inspire all future voyages. Once the final moon was passed and the last image was etched into the digital tape, the small hydrazine thrusters fired with a deliberate final purpose. These burns were not meant to reach another planet, for the path ahead contained only the infinite empty wilderness of the interstellar medium. The spacecraft was effectively being untethered from the planetary system, its role shifting from a surveyor of worlds to a silent messenger of a distant civilization. These final adjustments ensured that the probe would never return to the sun's warmth, committing it to an eternal exit from the home system. The trajectory was now a straight line into the dark, a path that leads away from all known landmarks. The fuel that once nudged the probe toward Jovian storms and Saturnian rings was now spent on the finality of the departure. The spacecraft began to settle into its new identity as an interstellar traveller, a solitary grain of metal moving through the enormous gaps between the stars. It carries with it the records of its journey, a silent archive of the 4 giants it visited. Ahead lies only the thin, cold plasma of the galaxy, waiting to receive its first visitor from Earth. The massive gravitational assist provided by the azure giant acted as a final, definitive slingshot, hurling the craft permanently southward. This maneuver carried the probe out of the ecliptic plane, the flat disk where all the planets reside, and sent it climbing into the 3-dimensional vastness of the galaxy. It was a parting gift from Neptune, providing the velocity needed to escape the Sun's gravitational pull forever. This southward trajectory means the probe will never again cross the path of another planet in our system. It is moving into a region of space that is completely empty, a vast corridor leading toward the southern constellations of the Milky Way. The spacecraft is no longer a satellite of the Sun, but a satellite of the galaxy itself, beginning an orbit that will take millions of years to complete. As your body continues to find its perfect resting equilibrium, the probe begins its eternal descent into the dark, moving forever away from the Sun toward the silent waiting stars. Behind it, the azure planet shrinks into a blue point of light, eventually fading into the background of 1,000 other stars. The mission is no longer about where it is going, but simply about the fact that it continues to exist. Long before the final fade into the distant stars, a visionary voice on Earth recognized that this existence deserved a final, reflective look back at its origins. Carl Sagan spent nearly a decade championing a seemingly simple, yet logistically perilous request to turn the unblinking eye of the spacecraft toward the inner warmth it had long since abandoned. Many within the upper echelons of NASA hesitated, fearing that pointing the sensitive imaging tubes toward the brilliant solar disk would cause irreparable damage to the aging hardware. The engineers were rightfully concerned about the risks of solar glare overwhelming the sensors at such a distance, potentially ending the mission's technical utility prematurely. Yet, the persistent advocacy of the mission's most vocal philosopher transformed a purely technical expedition into a deeply human endeavour of self-reflection. The command to execute this maneuver was eventually authorised, crossing the billions of miles of silent vacuum to initiate a slow, deliberate rotation of the entire mechanical chassis. It was a request born of the profound realisation that while the probe was a herald of the future, its story remained inextricably linked to the world that had cast it into the void. This final backward glance would serve as the definitive visual goodbye to the planetary neighbourhood that had nurtured the Voyager for 12 years. The machine prepared to gaze upon its birthplace one last time, capturing a perspective that no human eye could ever hope to attain. Deep within the archaic memory banks of the primary computer, a complex sequence for a grand mosaic began to unfold, orchestrated by a choreography of light and shadow. A mosaic of 60 separate frames was meticulously captured over the course of several hours, systematically documenting the entire family of worlds that occupy the Sun's gravitational embrace. This unprecedented portrait required the spacecraft to pivot repeatedly across the blackness, snapping individual segments of the sky to stitch together a comprehensive view of our planetary neighbourhood. The execution of this task was a slow and delicate process, requiring the cameras to stare into the vast emptiness to find the tiny, luminous points of the distant planets. Each frame contributed a small piece of a much larger puzzle, creating a sprawling digital map of the solar system from a perspective never before achieved by human technology. It was a tapestry of the home we'd just finished exploring, woven from the thin, cold light of the outer frontier. This massive undertaking was the last time the sensors would work in unison to observe the solar family in its entirety. The resulting collection of data provided a scale and context that shattered previous conceptions of our cosmic surroundings, revealing a system that was far more empty than the textbooks had ever suggested. As the 60 frames were transmitted back to the awaiting antennas on Earth, the true vastness of our home system was laid bare in a single silent record. Caught in the centre of scattered light rays, a single point of light emerged from the digital noise that would forever change the way we perceive our own significance. Earth appeared as a mere fraction of a pixel, a tiny and fragile speck of blue suspended precariously within a vast dark sunbeam that had been caught by the camera's internal optics. This specific image was a byproduct of light reflecting off the camera's internal shielding, creating a series of translucent diagonal bands across the frame. Within one of these accidental corridors of scattered solar light, our entire world sat motionless, a solitary dot occupying less than a single unit of digital information. Every human life, every historical event, and every terrestrial landscape was compressed into that nearly invisible blue shimmer at the heart of the void. It was an image of such staggering humility that it seemed to mock the grandeur of human ambition and the perceived scale of our global dramas. If we were to look closer, we would see nothing but a faint smudge against the obsidian background of the infinite universe. Yet that smudge contained everything we have ever known, a tiny outpost of warmth and biology in a cold and indifferent sea of stars. The fragility of that blue dot, isolated and small against the overwhelming dark, became the defining image of the entire interstellar era. Surprisingly, the universe offers no natural protection for that tiny speck, a realization that profoundly shifted the collective perspective of our species. This specific image forced a global recognition of humanity's delicate and lonely place within the incomprehensible scale of the cosmos. It removed the long-held illusion of a vast, invulnerable world and replaced it with the reality of a small, finite island of life drifting through an endless night. As your body remains grounded in the quiet weight of your chair or bed, consider the staggering lightness of that blue point as it drifts through the lightless abyss. The image became a mirror, reflecting our own vulnerability back at us from a distance of 6 billion miles. It spoke of the shared responsibility to preserve the only home we have ever had, a place that looks increasingly precious when viewed from the outside. This perspective shift bypassed national borders and cultural divides, offering a universal vision of terrestrial unity that was both chilling and inspiring. The pale blue dot became a catalyst for environmental and philosophical movements, grounding our complex social structures in the stark reality of our cosmic insignificance. It remains a silent visual plea for kindness and preservation in a universe where we are currently and uniquely alone. Achieving this feat from the edge of the solar system required more than just a simple rotation of the camera platform in the dark. Distances were so great and the ambient light so incredibly dim that the camera software had to be painstakingly rewritten and uploaded from Earth months in advance. The original programs were never designed to capture such faint, distant targets, while the spacecraft was moving at such extreme velocities. Engineers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory worked through the long nights to refine the exposure times and data compression algorithms, ensuring the sensors could find the planets in the gloom. This software update was a digital lifeline, sent across the vast gap to breathe new life into the aging optical systems before they were silenced forever. Without these precise modifications, the camera would have captured only a smear of electronic noise and empty, unidentifiable blackness. The success of this remote reprogramming highlighted the incredible adaptability of the mission's technical infrastructure even in its second decade of operation. It proved that even billions of miles away, the link between the machine and its creators remained a dynamic and evolving collaboration of the mind. This digital evolution allowed the probe to see what was previously invisible, turning a technical limitation into a historic victory of engineering. This cosmic structure revealed its members as tiny, isolated points of light, scattered like jewels across the velvet dark of the inner system. Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune were all visible as distinct, minuscule dots, caught in the scattered glare of the sun from a distance of billions of miles. Each of these worlds, once massive and complex during their individual flybys, had now shrunk back into the status of mere points of light. The portrait captured the true hierarchy of the solar system, where the planets appear as secondary players to the overwhelming dominance of the central star. Jupiter and Saturn remained the brightest of the set, while the distant ice giants were nearly lost in the deepening shadows of the outer reaches. They stood as silent markers of the path the probe had already traversed, a trail of breadcrumbs leading back to the original solar fire. Seeing these worlds simultaneously provided a sense of completeness to the primary mission's planetary objectives. It was a visual summary of the 12-year voyage, a final gathering of the giants before the explorer moved into the space where no planets dwell. Each dot represented a world of storms, rings and moons, now reduced to a simple luminous coordinate in the dark. A hidden inventory of the inner system remained obscured by the very fire that sustains the rest of the neighbourhood. Mars and Mercury were completely lost in the overwhelming brightness of the solar disk, swallowed by the same light that illuminated the other planets. Their proximity to the star made them impossible to distinguish with the sensitive optics of the outer space probe. The glare of the sun acted as a protective shroud, masking the rocky worlds from the gaze of their distant mechanical cousin as it looked back from the edge. This limitation served as a reminder of the sun's absolute power over the visibility of the neighbourhood it governs. The absence of these planets in the portrait created a haunting sense of the unseen, a realization that much of our system remains hidden within the star's radiant embrace. As you find your resting body sinking further into a state of deep, quiet calm, notice how even the most brilliant lights eventually create their own shadows. In the same way, the sun's brilliance created a wall of light that the probe could not pierce, leaving the inner rocky worlds to the imagination. The missing planets became a part of the vast, unobservable silence that defines so much of the interstellar journey. Shortly after the final mosaic was safely committed to the digital recorders, a deliberate and somber command was issued to the spacecraft by its controllers on Earth. Turning off the cameras was a necessary sacrifice to conserve the precious, dwindling power and memory required for the upcoming interstellar journey. Every watt of energy harvested from the decaying plutonium was now needed to keep the fields and particles instruments alive. This decommissioning marked the end of the probe's life as a visual observer, effectively blinding the traveller as it entered the true deep of the cosmos. The mechanical shutter clicked for the final time, sealing the optics away from the universe they had so faithfully documented for 13 years. From this point forward, the mission would shift from a search for images to a search for the invisible forces of the galaxy. The decision to go dark was a pragmatic acknowledgement of the mission's changing priorities as it left the planetary realm behind. The era of discovery through sight had concluded, replaced by a much longer and more mysterious phase of exploration through magnetic fields and plasma waves. The cameras had finished their work, leaving behind a legacy of vision that would never be surpassed in the history of deep space exploration. This structure of glass and metal, once warm with the activity of recording worlds, slowly began to settle into a permanent dark freeze. As the internal heaters were deactivated, the cooling optics succumbed to the absolute zero of the surrounding vacuum. The lenses, which had focused the light of 4 giant planets and 1,000 moons, were now just silent, frozen artifacts drifting through the dark. The mission shifted strictly to the study of magnetic fields and particle physics, utilizing sensors that do not require the light of the sun to function effectively. These instruments listen to the whispers of the interstellar medium, detecting the impact of cosmic rays and the vibrations of the solar wind's edge. The spacecraft had evolved into a tactile and auditory explorer, feeling its way through the dark rather than seeing it. This transition represented the final step in the probe's journey toward becoming a true interstellar object, disconnected from the visual world. It no longer needs to look back, and it has no reason to look forward. It simply exists as a receptive surface for the forces of the deep. The frozen cameras remain as a silent witness to the past, carried along by the momentum of a voyage that has no end in sight. That solitary blue dot, caught in its accidental beam of light, instantly became a global symbol of vulnerability and the preciousness of terrestrial life. It served as a profound reminder that everything we love and value exists on a tiny, fragile platform that is entirely unique in the observable dark. The image transcended its scientific origins to become a foundational piece of human culture and a primary source of modern wisdom. As the probe moves further into the interstellar night, it carries the memory of that dot as its most significant and enduring cargo. The image remains as a beacon of perspective, a silent call for unity and care across the billions of miles of empty vacuum. It is the final radiant synthesis of the mission's purpose, to look out into the dark so that we might truly see ourselves for the very first time. To look out into the dark so that we might truly see ourselves for the very first time, humanity realized that its presence in the void required a physical witness. Bolted securely to the exterior framework of each mechanical pioneer rests a 12-inch phonograph record, a shimmering artifact of gold-plated copper designed for a potential extraterrestrial encounter. This gleaming disc was not merely a decorative addition, but a meticulously engineered time capsule intended to outlast the very civilization that cast it into the void. It carries the collective memory of a vibrant world into the freezing, lightless regions where no organic life can ever hope to survive. The choice of a phonograph record was a deliberate move toward a format that is mechanically simple, yet capable of storing immense complexity. By etching our sounds and images into the metal, we ensured that the essence of Earth could be retrieved without the need for sophisticated or perishable computer systems. This record stands as a silent sentinel on the hull of the spacecraft, moving through the dark at tens of thousands of miles per hour. The gold plating serves as a protective layer, shielding the copper core from the corrosive elements of the interstellar medium over hundreds of millions of years. As the probe drifts further into the uncharted wilderness, this golden disk remains its most significant and enduring cargo, waiting for an audience that may not yet exist. Protecting this precious cargo from the relentless abrasions of the cosmos, a specialized aluminum jacket encases the disk to shield its delicate grooves from micrometeorite impacts over the eons. Even in the seemingly empty vacuum between stars, microscopic dust grains hurtle with enough kinetic energy to erode an exposed surface over millions of years. This metal shroud serves as a vital suit of armor, ensuring that the legacy of Earth remains pristine despite the grinding passage of deep time. Surprisingly, the interstellar medium is not a perfect void, but a sparse sea of particles that can act like cosmic sandpaper on a travelling vessel. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the cumulative effect of these tiny collisions would eventually blur the fine physical etchings containing our music and voices. The aluminum cover was designed to take the brunt of this damage, sacrificing its own surface to keep the internal records safe. Engineering choices like these reflect our awareness of the sheer scale of time the spacecraft will encounter as it orbits the galactic center. We did not build a message for a century or a millennium, but for a period that dwarfs the entire history of our species. The jacket is a silent promise to the future, a guarantee that our story will remain legible as long as the laws of physics allow. Etched with surgical precision upon the protective cover are mathematical symbols and diagrams designed to explain exactly how to decode the contents and play the record. These markings bypass the barriers of human language, relying instead on the universal truths of physics and geometry to communicate with an unknown intelligence. They provide a step-by-step instruction manual for translating physical indentations into the vibrant colours and haunting melodies of our home world. If we were to look closer, we would see a diagram representing a phonograph record and the stylus provided within the casing. This visual guide uses binary code, expressed through the fundamental properties of hydrogen, to define the correct speed for the turntable. It is a puzzle of logic and science, assuming that any civilization capable of intercepting the craft will also understand the basic mathematics of the universe. These symbols serve as a bridge between two worlds that may never meet face to face. They are the Rosetta Stone of the space age, offering a way for a stranger to unlock the secrets of a distant and possibly extinct civilization. By placing science at the forefront of the message, we ensured that the instructions for discovery are as timeless as the stars themselves. An intricate pulsar map provides the specific galactic coordinates of our solar system, based on the rhythmic pulses of 14 dying stars. By measuring the unique frequencies of these celestial beacons, any finder can triangulate the exact position of the Sun within the vast, swirling architecture of the Milky Way. It is a cosmic map that leads back across the light years to the small, warm cradle where the journey began. As you lie in a state of deepening stillness, feel the steady, rhythmic pulse of your own heart, a biological echo of those distant, ticking stars guiding the way home. Pulsars are incredibly precise cosmic clocks, emitting radio waves with a regularity that rivals the most advanced human timepieces. By defining our location relative to these persistent beacons, we provided an indestructible coordinate system that will remain valid for millions of years. Markers like these are a testament to our desire to be found, a deliberate breadcrumb trail left in the galactic woods. It represents a profound vulnerability, offering the location of our home to any being who might find our mechanical emissary drifting in the dark. In the silence of the interstellar void, this map is a quiet whisper of our address, a marker of where we stood when we first reached out to the stars. Engineered for eternity, the electroplated surface of the record has been meticulously over-engineered to remain structurally readable for at least 1 billion years in the harsh vacuum of space. While terrestrial monuments crumble into dust and oceans rise to reclaim the land, this small golden disk will remain essentially unchanged as it orbits the galactic centre. It is perhaps the most enduring object ever constructed by human hands, destined to drift through the void long after the Sun has expanded and the Earth has vanished. Interstellar space is a remarkably stable environment, devoid of the oxygen and moisture that cause metals to corrode and decay on our home planet. The gold-plated copper was chosen specifically for its chemical stability and its ability to maintain the integrity of the microscopic grooves over cosmic timeframes. This durability ensures that the music of Bach and the greetings in 55 languages will remain physically present in the universe for an epoch. We've created a monument that exists outside the reach of planetary geological cycles and atmospheric destruction. Long after the traces of our cities have been buried by the shifting crust of the Earth, this record will still be moving through the dark. It is an anchor of human identity, a permanent record of our existence that will outlast the very world that gave it birth. Recognizing that a finder might lack the specific technology to read our digital formats, the designers included a stylus cartridge within the casing to allow for a mechanical translation of the grooves. This low-tech approach ensures that the message can be accessed through the simple, physical interaction of a needle moving across a textured surface. It is a bridge between the high-velocity world of aerospace engineering and the tangible, tactile reality of basic mechanics, providing a universal key to our cultural archive. Including the physical hardware reflects a pragmatic and humble approach to interstellar communication. We did not assume that a future discoverer would possess our specific electronics or software, so we provided the physical tool required to unlock the sound. It is a mechanical solution to a philosophical problem, ensuring that the barriers to understanding are as low as possible for anyone who encounters the craft. This stylus is the final link in the chain of discovery, the physical point of contact between our world and another. It sits in weight, a small piece of metal and ceramic ready to vibrate with the sounds of Earth after 1 billion years of silence. Through this simple device, the echoes of our civilization can be reborn in the ears of a stranger, bridging the unbridgeable gap between the stars. Surprisingly, the entire tempo and scale of the message are grounded in the fundamental transition of a hydrogen atom, which serves as a universal clock and unit of measure. This atomic constant provides a shared language of time and distance that any scientifically advanced civilization would instantly recognize. By using the 21 centimeter line of the most abundant element in the universe, we established a baseline for understanding the duration of our music and the size of our world. Physics serves as the ultimate bridge between different intelligences, offering a set of laws that remain constant regardless of where a being originates. If we were to look closer at the quiet expansion of your own lungs, we would find a similarly fundamental rhythm, a baseline of life that persists even in the most profound silence. The record uses the spin-flip transition of hydrogen to define the binary units of time that govern the playback speed and the image reconstruction. Selecting hydrogen as the baseline ensures that the message is not tethered to our arbitrary human units, like seconds or inches, which would be meaningless to an alien mind. Instead, we have grounded our story in the very fabric of the cosmos, using the building blocks of the universe to explain who we are. It is a profound act of scientific communication, translating the human experience into the language of the atoms. Applied carefully to the center of the cover is a patch of uranium-238, serving as a radioactive clock that allows future discoverers to precisely calculate the date of the spacecraft's departure. Because the half-life of this isotope is a known physical constant, the steady decay of the atoms provides a timestamp that remains accurate across millions of years. This inclusion tells a potential finder not just where we were and what we sounded like, but exactly when we existed in the long history of the galaxy. Measuring the steady progression of this atomic clock provides a silent countdown that began the moment the probe was launched from the Florida soil. Over the eons, the ratio of uranium to its decay products will shift in a predictable manner, offering a clear and measurable record of the time that has passed. It is a way of anchoring our mission in the grand timeline of the universe, providing a specific context for our technological stage. Such radioactive markers are a reminder that we are creatures of time, existing in a brief and brilliant window of planetary history. It offers a sense of perspective to any discoverer, allowing them to see us as a part of a long and unfolding cosmic narrative. By including our launch date in the language of nuclear physics, we have ensured that our place in time is as clear as our place in space. Floating silently through the immense gaps between the stars, this artifact represents the ultimate cosmic message in a bottle cast into the dark, indifferent galactic ocean. It is a gesture of profound optimism, a signal of our existence sent into a wilderness where the odds of it ever being found are infinitesimally small. Yet, its presence transforms the vacuum from an empty void into a space that carries a human memory, a small shard of consciousness moving through the eternal dark. Crafted from gold and aluminum, this cosmic structure is a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be silenced by the vastness of the universe. We have sent our music and our laughter into a realm where no one may ever hear it, simply because the act of reaching out is a fundamental part of being human. The record is a hopeful question asked of the infinite. Is there anyone else out there who understands the beauty of a song? Even if the message is never found, its journey remains a significant achievement for our species. It represents a moment when we looked beyond our planetary conflicts and local concerns to address the universe as a whole. In the quiet, lightless expanse of the interstellar medium, this message in a bottle remains a radiant symbol of our capacity for wonder and our desire for connection. Assembling a diverse committee of visionary scientists, artists, and educators was essential to curate the true essence of Earth for a billion-year audience. This group, led by thinkers who understood the weight of representing an entire planet, struggled to condense the complexity of human culture into a few dozen images and sounds. Their work resulted in a portrait of a species that is curious, musical, and deeply eager to be known, even across the unbridgeable gulfs of space and time. Curating this archive forced a confrontation with the impossible task of choosing which sounds and images would represent the diversity of life on Earth to a completely alien mind. They included the sound of a mother's kiss, the roar of a rocket, and the intricate patterns of a snowflake alongside the timeless compositions of diverse global cultures. Their selection was a labour of love and intellect, a careful balancing of the scientific, the artistic, and the deeply personal. Notice the heavy, comforting warmth of your own presence in this moment, a living part of the very story that these gold-plated messengers are carrying into the infinite night. The diverse perspectives of the committee ensured that the message was not just a record of technology, but a record of humanity's heart. Their legacy is a golden mirror drifting through the stars, waiting to show the universe the beauty of the world we call home. Waiting to show the universe the beauty of the world we call home, the record begins its testimony with the intimate vibrations of human speech. Encoded deep within the physical grooves are spoken greetings in 55 different ancient and modern human languages, a polyphonic chorus representing the linguistic diversity of our species. These messages bridge the vast temporal gaps of our history, beginning with the archaic whispers of Sumerian and stretching through the centuries to reach the modern dialects of the present day. Each greeting was recorded with the hope that an alien ear might detect the common thread of hospitality and goodwill that defines our civilization. The voices are often rhythmic and soft, carrying the subtle inflections of hope that survived the transition from biological breath to gold-plated copper. This linguistic tapestry serves as an auditory welcoming committee, offering a hand across the light years to anyone who might find the vessel. By including such a wide array of tongues, the creators ensured that no single culture dominated the message, reflecting a unified planet. It is a hauntingly beautiful collection of phonemes, now drifting in a realm where sound itself cannot travel. These greetings were meant to be the first handshake of our species, a signal that we were here and we wanted to say hello. This structure of the cosmic greeting extends beyond the limits of human speech to include the wild, unscripted voices of our living planet. Natural sounds of cracking thunder, whistling wind, and breaking waves paint an acoustic picture of our dynamic biosphere for an audience that has never seen a sunset. These recordings capture the raw energy of the terrestrial environment, from the deep rumble of tectonic shifts to the delicate pitter-patter of a summer rainstorm. They represent the atmospheric and geological rhythms that shape the evolution of all life on our watery world. To a listener from a world without air or oceans, these sounds would be a startling revelation of a planet that is constantly in motion. The acoustic landscape includes the bustling energy of a forest, filled with birds and the rhythmic churning of a sea that covers most of our surface. Each sound was meticulously leveled to provide a clear and immersive experience, creating a sensory bridge to a landscape 6 billion miles away. It is a sonic portrait of a world that is loud, vibrant, and profoundly alive, even as its emissary moves through the absolute silence of the void. These tracks allow the Earth to speak for itself, bypassing the need for human translation or cultural context. Deep within the spiraling grooves, the record holds an eclectic mix of music that spans the entire breadth of human creativity and emotional depth. The selection ranges from the complex mathematical symmetry of Bach to the driving, rebellious rhythm of Chuck Berry, capturing the diverse ways we have translated the human experience into sound. This curated playlist includes the soulful wail of the blues, the intricate patterns of classical compositions, and the communal chants of traditional folk music from every continent. Music was chosen as a universal language that might communicate our capacity for joy, sorrow, and transcendent wonder without the need for literal translation. The rhythms act as a heartbeat for the message, pulsing with the energy of 1 billion human lives. Each track was transferred to the master disc with an attention to detail that preserved the subtle textures of the original performances. From the soaring notes of a panpipe to the electric energy of a rock and roll guitar, the music represents the peak of our expressive capabilities. It is a gift of art cast into the darkness, a testament to the idea that our creative spirit is our most enduring quality. This collection serves as a rhythmic record of our species, moving through the stars as a permanent concert of the human soul. Surprisingly, the record contains a deeply personal and intimate layer of data that transcends even the communal sounds of music and speech. brainwaves of a young woman thinking passionately about the history of Earth and the overwhelming experience of falling in love were translated directly into audio frequencies. These recordings capture the electrical signatures of human thought and emotion, offering a literal map of a mind in a state of profound reflection. The process involved recording both an electrocardiogram and an electroencephalogram, turning the internal rhythms of a human being into a series of rhythmic, alien-sounding chirps and hums. This data represents a bold attempt to communicate the subjective experience of consciousness to a completely different form of intelligence. It is a record of what it feels like to be human, encoded in the very pulses that govern our awareness. The thoughts included a survey of terrestrial history, the struggles of our species, and the personal quiet joy of a developing romance. This inclusion adds a layer of biological and psychological authenticity to the message, ensuring that it is not just a record of what we made, but a record of who we are. It is the most intimate part of the package, a silent scream of existence sent into the infinite. This structure of hidden information carries a cargo of light and form concealed within the sound waves of the golden disc. Over 100 analog images are cleverly hidden within the audio track, requiring a specific mathematical decoding to be visually reconstructed by a finder's technology. These images were converted into a series of acoustic pulses, essentially turning pictures into a dense and complex melody that can be reversed by anyone who understands frequency modulation. This ingenious method of storage allows for a massive amount of visual information to be carried without the need for digital storage media that would degrade over the eons. The images appear as a rhythmic, high-pitched scratching when played through a standard speaker, a digital ghost waiting to be summoned back into visibility. Each pulse represents a single line of a photograph, building a picture of Earth from the ground up, line by painstaking line. This technique ensures that the visual legacy of our planet is tied directly to the same durable grooves that hold our music and speech. It is a masterful integration of sound and sight, a dual-layered message designed to provide a comprehensive look at our terrestrial reality. By hiding the light within the sound, we created a message that is both efficient and profoundly clever in its execution. If we were to look closer at the visual data, we would discover a sweeping and detailed gallery of our world, carefully curated to show our best qualities. The pictures depict the intricate complexity of human anatomy, the soaring heights of our architecture, the diversity of our global cultures, and our foundational understanding of mathematics. From the geometric perfection of a snowflake to the bustling energy of a city street, the images offer a silent tour of our world. The selection was intentionally designed to avoid the depiction of war, poverty, or political conflict, presenting instead a vision of a species that is cooperative and creative. It includes diagrams of our DNA, the structure of our solar system, and the various ways we interact with our environment. These photographs are a silent testimony to our curiosity and our ability to build complex societies across a wide array of landscapes. Each image was selected for its clarity and its ability to communicate a fundamental truth about our existence to an observer who may have no context for our lives. It is a visual encyclopedia of the human experience, drifting through a space where no light ever falls on its surface. This gallery allows the universe to see us as we see ourselves, a species of builders, thinkers, and explorers. Surprisingly, the message recognizes that the story of Earth is not a story of humans alone, but a shared narrative involving all our biosphere's inhabitants. The haunting, melodic song of the humpback whale echoes into the cosmos as a representative of non-human terrestrial intelligence. These deep-sea vocalizations were included to show that our world is home to diverse forms of awareness and communication that exist outside the human sphere. The complex, mournful cries of the whales carry a sense of ancient wisdom and oceanic scale, providing a counterpoint to the shorter sounds of human activity. This inclusion honors the biological diversity of our planet and acknowledges the presence of other sentient beings who share our journey. The recordings capture the resonance of the deep ocean, a realm that is as vast and mysterious as the space the probe now inhabits. It is a gesture of humility, admitting that we are part of a larger, interconnected web of life that we do not fully understand. The whale song acts as a bridge between the biological and the cosmic, a long-distance call from the depths of our oceans to the stars. By including these voices, we acknowledge that our world is a collective effort of multiple intelligences and varied forms of life. As your body surrenders to the steady, comforting weight of the surface beneath you, notice the profound value found in the moments where nothing is happening at all. Complete silence was carefully preserved between the various tracks and messages to give the potential alien listener a necessary moment to process the diversity. These gaps of quietude are not empty space, but a deliberate part of the acoustic design, providing a rhythmic punctuation to the flow of information. They allow for the echoes of a language or a song to settle before the next piece of data begins its journey through the needle. In the vacuum of space, these moments of silence on the record mirror the absolute stillness of the environment through which the spacecraft travels. The silence serves as a palate cleanser for the senses, ensuring that the message does not become an overwhelming blur of noise. It reflects a human understanding of pacing and the importance of reflection in the process of learning. This intentional quiet is a gift of time, a small pocket of peace provided to a stranger from a distant world. It ensures that every sound has its own space to exist and to be heard with clarity, even across the vast, lonely gaps of interstellar space. Every piece of audio and every hidden image was meticulously selected with a single guiding purpose: to show the peaceful, vibrant, and curious nature of our species. The creators of the record wanted to present a version of humanity that was worthy of being known by a superior intelligence, focusing on our capacity for art and science. This was an act of aspirational self-portraiture, highlighting the qualities that make us reach for the stars in the first place. The entire package is a statement of hope, a belief that despite our flaws, our curiosity is a light that deserves to be seen in the dark. It is a portrait of a civilization that is young, eager, and profoundly interested in the world beyond its own atmosphere. This curated selection serves as our best foot forward, a radiant introduction to the children of the sun. This curated playlist of human and terrestrial existence ensures that the cultural and biological legacy of humanity will outlive the Earth itself. As the record moves through the galaxy, it carries the essence of our world into a future that is measured in billions of years. Even if our civilization should fall and our world be reclaimed by the fire of a dying star, this small golden disk will remain. It is an act of defiance against the inevitable passage of time and the eventual silence of our home world. The record is a seed of human history cast into the galactic soil, waiting for an encounter that may happen in an epoch we cannot imagine. It guarantees that our songs, our voices, and our images will continue to exist as a physical presence in the universe for as long as the galaxy endures. This realization provides a sense of peace, knowing that our most precious memories have been given a chance at immortality. We have cast our shadows into the future, ensuring that the light of our world will never be completely extinguished from the cosmic record. The journey continues, a silent and eternal broadcast of the world we once called home. Moving away from the world we once called home, the silent traveller began to feel the first subtle shifts in the very fabric of space. Decades after the initial fire of launch had faded into a distant memory, the sensitive instruments aboard the craft detected a dramatic and unmistakable drop in the outward speed of charged particles emitted by our sun. This solar wind, which had pushed against the probe's hull with a steady and visible force for billions of miles, was finally beginning to lose its momentum. It was the first indication that the reach of our local star was not infinite, but had a definitive, detectable limit. The stream of protons and electrons slowed down significantly as it encountered the encroaching pressure of the interstellar medium. This deceleration, known as the termination shock, signaled that the explorer was approaching the final frontier of the sun's domain. The quiet hum of the machinery continued, recording the transition from a solar-dominated environment to a realm where the influence of the stars began to take hold. This structure of the solar system is defined by a massive asymmetrical magnetic bubble known as the heliosphere. It acts as a protective shield for our entire planetary neighbourhood, carved out by the constant outward pressure of the solar wind. This cosmic structure deflects the majority of deadly interstellar radiation and high-energy particles that would otherwise strip away planetary atmospheres and endanger biological life. It is a sprawling, invisible architecture that defines the true boundary of our celestial home. Piercing the inner boundary of this shield meant flying blindly through the helio sheath, a chaotic and highly compressed region of turbulent plasma. In this transition zone, the solar wind collides with the encroaching interstellar medium, creating a thick layer of agitated particles and tangled magnetic fields. The spacecraft was subjected to a violent and unpredictable environment, where the familiar rules of the inner solar system no longer seemed to apply. It was a journey through a literal no-man's land of space, where the invisible forces of the star and the galaxy were locked in a perpetual swirling struggle. The plasma in this region becomes hot and dense, slowing down to a crawl as it piles up against the edge of the interstellar void. Navigating through this turbulent mess required absolute mechanical resilience, as the probe was buffeted by the fluctuating pressures of two competing cosmic winds. Scientists watched the data with bated breath, realizing they were witnessing a phenomenon that had never before been measured in situ. This chaotic crossing was the final gauntlet before the explorer could break free into the true deep of the Milky Way. Surprisingly, the environment outside this bubble revealed itself through a sudden and dramatic spike in cosmic ray hits on the spacecraft's detectors. As the protective, shielding influence of the sun began to permanently wane, high-energy particles from distant supernova explosions and active galactic nuclei began to bombard the hull with increasing frequency. This transition marked the first time we could directly measure the true radiation environment of the galaxy, unpolluted by the sun's local interference. As you feel the gentle, rhythmic weight of your resting body, consider the profound security provided by the layers of magnetic and atmospheric protection that surround your home. This spike in radiation was the definitive proof that the explorer was leaving the safety of the nest and entering the wilder, more energetic reaches of the deep. The sun's influence, while vast, was finally being eclipsed by the collective energy of 100 billion other stars. This data confirmed that the spacecraft had truly crossed the threshold, moving into a realm where the galaxy itself was the dominant force. History was silently made in the late summer of 2012, when the first of the twin probes officially crossed this theoretical boundary and ventured into completely unknown territory. The data transmitted back to the Deep Space Network revealed a sudden disappearance of solar particles and an unprecedented stillness in the local plasma environment. It was a moment of profound transformation, as a human-made object transitioned from being a resident of the solar system to becoming a visitor of the stars. This crossing occurred billions of miles from Earth, yet the confirmation of its success rippled through the scientific community as a monumental achievement of persistence. The pioneer had finally achieved what was once thought impossible, leaving the sun's domain entirely behind. It entered the interstellar medium, a space of cold, thin gas and ancient starlight that has remained untouched by human influence since the dawn of time. This historic milestone marked the beginning of a new era of exploration, where our reach finally extended beyond the cradle of our birth star. It confirmed that the boundary is a living, breathing frontier that reacts to the shifting pressures of the galactic wind and the internal cycles of the sun. This encounter deepened our map of the invisible landscape that separates our home from the rest of the cosmos, showing that the exit from the solar system is as complex as the system itself. The twin explorers, now both in the interstellar dark, provided a dual perspective on the final limits of the sun's reach. Their separate paths revealed the asymmetry of our celestial home, proving that the galaxy presses against us in different ways depending on where you look. Deep within the aging framework, the struggle for survival became an exercise in ruthless efficiency as diminishing power reserves continued to decline. Every year, the decaying plutonium generators provide slightly less electricity, forcing engineers on Earth to make agonizing decisions about which systems to turn off forever. Heaters were deactivated one by one, and non-essential scientific instruments were silenced to ensure the primary communication and particle sensors could continue to function. It is a slow and deliberate winding down of a mechanical life, a graceful transition into a state of minimal existence. Notice the quiet, steady rhythm of your own environment, where the flow of energy is often taken for granted. This management of power is the only way to extend the mission's reach into the deepest parts of the interstellar night, trading the warmth of the hardware for the longevity of the message. The spacecraft has become a minimalist traveller, carrying only the most vital sensors into the unknown. Surprisingly, the instruments have miraculously remained alive and functional despite operating at temperatures far below their original designed limits. Components that were never intended to endure the absolute freeze of the interstellar medium continue to click and hum in the dark, defying the expectations of their original builders. This structural resilience is a testament to the robust engineering of a bygone era, where durability was prioritized over rapid obsolescence. The sensors operate in a realm where the cold is so profound it would shatter most modern electronics instantly. Yet, through some combination of robust design and sheer mechanical willpower, the explorers continue to send their reports from the edge of the infinite. They have survived for nearly half a century in the most hostile environment imaginable, proving that human ingenuity can build machines that outlast their creators. This survival against all odds has allowed us to continue listening to the whispers of the galaxy, long after the primary mission was completed. If we could listen to the data streaming back through the plasma wave antennas, we would hear the haunting, high-pitched whistling sounds of the dense interstellar medium. These acoustic signatures are the result of the spacecraft's instruments vibrating in response to the density of the cold, galactic plasma it now inhabits. Unlike the relatively thin and hot environment inside the sun's bubble, the space between the stars is thick with a different kind of matter that creates a distinct, eerie resonance. These sounds were the definitive confirmation of the probe's arrival in the galaxy, a sonic signature of a frontier that had never before been heard. It is the music of the deep, a rhythmic and lonely whistling that accompanies the traveller as it moves away from the last echoes of the solar wind. This auditory data provides a visceral connection to the environment of the stars, turning a mathematical boundary into a tangible sounding reality. The galaxy is not a silent void, but a place with its own unique and haunting voice. Leaving the solar wind behind marked the very first time in history that a human-made object entered the vast, unbridgeable space between the stars. This achievement redefined the boundaries of human reach, proving that our curiosity could indeed transcend the gravitational and magnetic limits of our birth star. The spacecraft is now an inhabitant of the galaxy at large, moving along a trajectory that will not encounter another star for tens of thousands of years. It represents the ultimate extension of our species, a solitary grain of technology drifting through the enormous gaps of the cosmos. The probe carries with it the records of our world, a silent archive moving through a space that is billions of times larger than the neighbourhood it left behind. As you surrender to the absolute stillness of your surroundings, reflect on the monumental scale of a voyage that has finally crossed the threshold of the home system. The transition is complete, and the Voyager is now a permanent citizen of the interstellar dark. Drifting outward at a velocity that exceeds 38,000 miles per hour, the mechanical traveller has effectively traded the local tethers of our sun for the grander embrace of the Milky Way's gravity. Even at this blistering speed, the probe remains a quiet captive of the galaxy's mass, destined to follow a sweeping orbit around the galactic centre. This orbital path is so gargantuan that it will take nearly 250 million years to complete a single revolution, a time frame that encompasses the entire rise and fall of the dinosaurs on our home world. The transition from a planetary satellite to a permanent galactic resident is an unalterable state, as the craft lacks the kinetic energy to escape the collective pull of 100 billion stars. It is now a speck of human-made matter caught in the rotating storm of light and dark that forms the spiral arms of our galaxy. This inescapable bond ensures that even as the spacecraft leaves our solar system, it remains a permanent part of the same cosmic structure that houses its creators. If we were to look closer at the physics of this drift, we would recognize that the probe is essentially falling through the galaxy in a state of weightless grace. It follows the same invisible currents that guide the stars, moving with a momentum that is both terrifying in its scale and utterly tranquil in its execution. Feel the heavy stillness of your own body, safe and anchored in this moment, as you contemplate a journey that will never leave the bounds of the celestial island we inhabit. The ticking of this radioactive clock is an uncompromising physical reality that the mission controllers have managed with incredible ingenuity for nearly 50 years. Once the internal temperature drops below the level needed to keep the electronics functional, the spacecraft will become a ghost in the void, its circuits cooling to the absolute zero of the surrounding vacuum. It will no longer be a probe capable of recording the universe, but a silent, cold artifact moving through the light years with a history that can no longer be updated. This impending silence is the natural and necessary conclusion to a mission that has already outlasted every original expectation and warranty. The transition to total silence will not be a failure of the machine, but a fulfillment of its design, allowing it to move from a state of active reporting to one of eternal existence. As the last pulse of data ripples back toward the deep space network, the link between the mortal creators and their mechanical child will finally be severed. Long after the final signal fades and the internal hum of the electronics is extinguished forever, the relentless momentum of the spacecraft will carry it toward the distant constellations of Ophiuchus and Andromeda. These stellar arrangements serve as the ultimate, unchangeable beacons for a traveller that no longer possesses a functioning compass or a means to steer its course. Without any atmospheric drag or gravitational resistance to slow it down, the Voyager will maintain its heading through the empty corridors of the galaxy for eons. It is a journey into the deep future, where the familiar arrangement of the night sky will slowly rearrange itself as the probe crosses the enormous gaps between stellar systems. The destination is not a single planet or a specific moon, but a vector into the infinite, a path that intersects with the grandest structures of the local universe. This movement represents a permanent bridge between the small-scale ambitions of a terrestrial species and the enduring, silent clockwork of the cosmos at large. Surprisingly, the universe offers no resistance to this drift, allowing the craft to maintain its velocity through a vacuum so perfect it preserves the motion of the 20th century into the far distant future. Every mile it covers is a testimony to the original force of the launch, a lingering echo of the Florida soil shaking beneath the engines so many years ago. As you rest in the absolute stillness of the moment, imagine a motion so steady and persistent that it completely ignores the passage of human centuries. In roughly 40,000 years, a period that dwarfs the recorded history of our civilization, Voyager 1 will pass within 2 light-years of the distant and dim star known as Gliese 445. This encounter will mark the closest the probe ever gets to another stellar neighbour in the foreseeable future, a fleeting proximity that highlights the staggering emptiness of the interstellar medium. While 2 light-years is still a gulf of nearly 12 trillion miles, it represents a historic moment where a human artifact will be closer to another sun than to our own. By the time this distant rendezvous occurs, the very civilization that constructed the spacecraft may have transformed into something unrecognizable or vanished entirely into the geological record. The probe will slide past this red dwarf star like a silent ship in a lightless sea, its golden record still waiting for a hand that might never reach for it. This specific milestone is a sobering reminder of the scale of our neighbourhood, where even at extreme speeds, it takes 40 millennia just to brush the outskirts of a neighbouring system. The Voyager remains a solitary scout, navigating a geography of light and shadow that makes the entire history of human thought seem like a brief, flickering spark. It moves through a space where time is measured in stellar lifetimes rather than human heartbeats, proving that our reach can indeed extend into the deep time of the galaxy. This flyby of an alien sun will be performed in total silence, a private meeting between a machine from Earth and a star that will never know its name. The gold plating that currently protects the message of humanity will slowly be eroded over the eons by the endless and microscopic barrage of interstellar dust grains. In the profound vacuum between the stars, these tiny particles move with such relative velocity that each impact acts like a microscopic explosion on the surface of the metal. Over millions of years, this cumulative effect will function like a cosmic sandblaster, gradually scouring the brilliant finish and dulling the once radiant face of the golden record. This slow erosion is a physical diary of the journey itself, a tally of every collision with the invisible matter that fills the gaps between the spiral arms of the Milky Way. The face of the craft will eventually become pitted and scarred, its geometric edges softened by the relentless friction of moving through the galaxy's extremely thin atmosphere. Despite this weathering, the message etched into the deeper layers of the gold-plated copper is expected to remain readable for at least 1 billion years. It is a durable testament to our existence that persists despite the tireless sandpaper of time and the corrosive energy of cosmic rays. This transformation is a slow-motion dialogue between the craft and the universe, where the galaxy slowly rewrites the surface of the machine to match its own ancient texture. As you sink deeper into a state of quiet contemplation, consider a transformation that takes longer than the rising and falling of entire mountain ranges on our home planet. They represent a profound and beautiful paradox. Our oldest and most archaic operational technology is currently serving as our furthest and most daring outpost of human exploration. The same machines that were designed using slide rules and built with transistors from the mid-20th century are now the only pieces of our world to have touched the interstellar medium. This staggering gap between the origins of the craft and its current location creates a bridge across time, linking the early days of the space age with the ultimate frontier. While we continue to build increasingly sophisticated telescopes to study the nearby planets, these simple, resilient pioneers continue to carry our curiosity into a realm where no modern engine has yet followed. It is a reminder that endurance and robust simplicity can sometimes outshine the most complex and fragile of our modern innovations. The Voyager is a relic of our past that has become the vanguard of our future, a mechanical survivor that refuses to become obsolete even as it moves away from everything it once knew. This paradox defines our relationship with the deep, where the furthest reach of our collective mind is currently carried by the humblest of our tools. The survival of these machines into the third decade of the 21st century is a miracle of engineering that continues to provide data from the edge of the infinite. They are the living fossils of our technological ambition, proving that a well-built dream can endure far longer than the people who first dreamt it. The spacecraft are literally destined to outlive the mountains, the oceans, and perhaps even the Earth itself as it exists in its current form. As the planetary cycles of our homeworld eventually erode the continents and change the atmosphere, the Voyager will remain largely unchanged in the stable vacuum of the interstellar void. It has escaped the entropic forces of weather, biology, and plate tectonics that will eventually erase almost every trace of human civilization from the terrestrial surface. In this sense, the spacecraft is the ultimate archive, a physical piece of the 20th century that is effectively shielded from the decay of terrestrial time. It will exist as a silent witness to our era, long after the last cities have crumbled into dust and the sun has begun its long, slow expansion into the final stages of its life. This longevity is the final gift of the mission, a guarantee that the memory of our species will persist as a tangible object in the universe for an epoch. Deep within the lightless expanse, the probe carries the signatures of our existence into a future where the Earth itself may be a cold, forgotten rock. It is the only part of us that is truly permanent, a shard of human consciousness that has been granted immortality by the laws of physics. Notice the steady, enduring presence of your own breath, a temporary rhythm that is currently connected to a machine that will exist for 1 billion years. Eventually, these twin explorers will become silent, frozen monuments orbiting the galactic centre for billions of years without any remaining purpose or function. They will drift through the spiral arms of the Milky Way as artifacts of a lost age, moving through the light of stars that have not yet been born and past the remains of those that have already died. Their cameras will remain dark, their internal heaters will be cold, and their messages will be waiting in a silence that is as profound as the void itself. Without any internal power or a way to communicate, they will be no different from the comets and asteroids that inhabit the deep reaches of space, except for the deliberate geometry of their construction. They will be cosmic fossils, preserved in the absolute zero of the interstellar medium, carrying the physical fingerprint of a species that once looked at the sky and wondered what lay beyond. This aimless orbiting is the ultimate state of the mission, a transition from an active search for knowledge to a passive, eternal presence in the galaxy. The Voyager does not need a specific destination to be successful. Its mere existence in the void is the completion of its primary journey. It will continue to orbit the centre of the Milky Way long after the constellations we know have shifted and vanished, a silent companion to the rotating disk of 100 billion stars. This is the fate of the messenger, to become a part of the message itself, drifting through the dark for eternity. Every passing second of this eternal drift continuously increases the vast and unbridgeable distance between the mortal creators and their immortal mechanical creation. As the probe moves further into the dark, the radio signals that once connected it to Earth become increasingly stretched and faint, until the gap becomes so great that light itself takes a lifetime to bridge the gulf. This separation is not just a matter of physical miles, but a temporal disconnect, as the spacecraft moves into a future that its builders will never witness. The umbilical cord of telemetry that has bound us together for nearly half a century is slowly fraying, preparing to snap and leave the explorer to its own devices in the dark. We are witnessing the final, slow-motion departure of a child of humanity, a parting that is as inevitable as the expansion of the universe itself. This distance serves as a measure of our ambition, a physical scale of how far we are willing to cast our thoughts and our tools into the unknown. Surprisingly, this distance does not diminish the significance of the mission, but rather enhances it, as each mile gained adds to the legacy of the voyage. The separation is the proof of the mission's success, a widening gap that marks the progress of our reach into the infinite. As you find a state of absolute resting equilibrium, consider the beauty of a bond that persists even as the distance between two hearts becomes mathematically infinite. Even in their absolute final silence, these intrepid machines will continue to flawlessly fulfill their ultimate and most enduring mission, simply moving forward. The act of movement, of crossing the light years without stopping, is the foundational purpose that remains when every other scientific objective has been stripped away. They are the physical embodiment of the human drive to explore, a relentless push into the unknown that requires no audience and no acknowledgement to continue its work. If we were to look closer at the destiny of the craft, we would see that its movement is the most honest expression of our spirit. It carries our curiosity into a future where we can no longer follow, moving with a grace and a persistence that defines the best of our species. The mission is not over. It has simply transitioned into its most pure and enduring form, a silent broadcast of the fact that we were here and we chose to reach for the stars. Deep within the grand synthesis of this half-century voyage, we recognize a profound and final truth. We cast fragile machines into the dark to measure the bounds of the universe, only to realize they ultimately measure the boundless, enduring scope of our own curiosity. This realization serves as the ultimate anchor for the entire journey, transforming a technical expedition into a mirror of the human spirit. This quiet room now becomes the center of your awareness as the distant echoes of the interstellar wind fade into silence. Surprisingly, the body begins to mirror the absolute stillness of the deep, finding a heavy and perfect equilibrium against the soft surface of the bed. We start this final descent by bringing all attention down to the very tips of the toes, feeling them release any lingering tension into the cool fabric of the sheets. Notice how the feet and ankles surrender their weight, sinking deeper into the supportive layers beneath you. The calves and knees follow this lead, becoming heavy and motionless as the muscles let go of the days-long journey. Every fibre of the lower body is now resting in a state of total, unburdened peace, mirroring the silent drift of a craft in the dark. As the awareness drifts higher, the muscles of the thighs and the core allow the last remnants of effort to be replaced by a liquid sense of relaxation. This sensation moves upward through the spine, settling each vertebra into the comfort of the mattress like points of light finding their place in a quiet arrangement. The internal heartbeat is slow and steady, a rhythmic pulse that requires no energy and is shielded from the cold of the outer reaches. The hips and lower back now settle into the mattress, finding a deep and comfortable groove in the center of the room. This rhythmic expansion of the chest remains the only movement, a slow and steady tide that requires no effort and no thought. The fabric of the pillow feels incredibly soft against the skin, inviting the shoulders to drop away from the ears and dissolve into the shadows. If we were to look closer at the breath, we would find a cooling, gentle stream that flows in and out with absolute regularity. The neck and the jaw release their final hold, allowing the tongue to rest and the face to become a mask of perfect, smooth tranquility. Every muscle in the forehead and around the eyes softens, as if being smoothed by a kind and invisible hand. The room is a cocoon of safety, a place where the air is still and the darkness is a warm, protective blanket. Here, the only reality is the weight of your limbs and the soft texture of the bedding pressing against your form. The mind begins to drift, untethered from words and images, sinking into the quiet depths of a dreamless rest. Everything is balanced, everything is quiet, and the world outside the door has ceased to exist for a while. The mattress holds you completely, absorbing every ounce of tension until you are as light as the air and as heavy as the earth. This is the moment where the journey ends and the long restorative silence begins. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.